Beware. When I was a kid, studying Bible prophecy under some of the great old-time prophecy preachers, and they talked about the unification of Europe, it seemed almost like a dream. Today, it is a reality right before our eyes. In light of all of that, you have the Western nations constantly trying to broker peace treaties in the Middle East. Our president right now is in the Middle East trying to do that. And yet up to this point, every one of those treaties has failed. But we know from Bible prophecy there will come a time that ultimately the leader of the world in the time of the tribulation will make such a treaty with the nation of Israel, will guarantee their survival in the Middle East. That treaty is yet to come. But the fact that people are attempting to make such treaties already ought to get our attention. And then I think the ultimate is the threat of nuclear weapons. Somebody said to me, "How do you know the rapture's near?" I said, "Nuclear bombs. It's only a matter of time till some madman somewhere has one and is willing to push the button and deliver it." One of the concerns our government has right now is that in Pakistan, there are 60 nuclear weapons in that country. And all of a sudden, the government is destabilized by the assassination of Mrs. Bhutto. You have this kind of scenario in places all over the world today, whether it's in Russia or India or Pakistan or in the former Russian Soviet republics like Kazakhstan. You have an unstable environment with nuclear weapons as a reality, and we can walk around and blind ourselves to that reality, but they exist. And it's only a matter of time. Thank God, in a window of grace, we haven't had to deal with that since 1945. But it's only a matter of time, given the nature of the depravity of the human heart, that eventually weapons of mass destruction will be used to push the planet almost to the brink of extinction. When we read the book of Revelation, the tribulation period, the grass burns up, the trees burn up, the air is polluted, the water is polluted, a ball of fire falls in the ocean, etc. It's possible that it's cosmic judgment. It's possible that it's a geological catastrophe. But when you read the book of Revelation, armies are marching, men are fighting, the world is at war, and it sounds like nuclear war. The stage is set. Now, let me try to illustrate that for a moment. Let's say that you came in here this morning expecting the conference to start this morning at 9 o'clock, but the lights were turned off. There wasn't anybody here. There was nothing going on the platform. They'd taken down the big sign back here. You might think, man, I'm not sure they're having a conference today. The stage isn't set. Nothing's happening. But if you sat here and all of a sudden they came in, put the sign up, turned the lights on, brought out the band, and opened the doors and turned on the lights, people began to come in, you'd say to yourself, I think we're going to have a conference. The stage has been set. That's what's happening in Bible prophecy today. God is setting the stage for the last days, so that when the trumpet sounds and the archangel shouts, everything is in place to fulfill the predictions of the end times. That tells us again, number 3, the restoration of Israel is significant as one of the warnings of the time in which we live. Now, I've heard people try to blow the whole thing off and say, well, Israel today they're an accident of history. Bunch of well-meaning premillennial British people that got behind the Balfour Declaration. Why, it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They believed one day the Jews would go back to the land, so they decided, well, Britain is in control over there, we'll just give them the land and help God out. But I would remind you, after 1,900 years of being expelled from that promised land, and only a handful of Jewish people able to ever come back there, for God to cause a nation to be born in a day is a miracle of God, not just some well-meaning people. It's a miracle of God that the United Nations authorized it. And it's a miracle of God that the Soviet Union voted for it. When I look at prophecies, I think of Amos chapter 9. Where it says that I will bring back my people Israel and plant them in their own land, never to be uprooted again. That didn't happen after the Babylonian captivity. They came back and they were uprooted again. After the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, they were uprooted and dispersed. But Amos, looking down through the corridor of time, down through the halls of history, said, I see a day when Israel will come back to the promised land, be planted in this land again, never to be uprooted. Now, I know there's a great deal of discussion about the territory in Israel and who has claimed what part of the land and why are they talking about exchanging territory, etc. And I can't tell you from a human standpoint what will happen there on the immediate scene. But I can tell you that ultimately in the millennial kingdom, all of the boundaries will be fulfilled. Jews may not get all of Israel prior to the millennial kingdom, but the very fact that they have a significant portion of it right now, the very fact that the whole claim to the land is at stake right now, tells us that we are in the last days. When I think of Zechariah's prophecies alone in the book of Zechariah, he says in the last days, Israel and Jerusalem will be the ultimate issue of the end times. Jerusalem will be the stone of stumbling, the cup of trembling, that they will be attacked by the nations around them. And Zechariah and Joel and the other prophets predict that all the nations are coming against Israel in the end times, that there will be a great mourning at Megiddo, at Armageddon, that ultimately the Jewish people will be converted and they will look on him whom they have pierced and cry out to him as their only son. That Jesus Christ himself in Zechariah 14 will return and split the Mount of Olives in half, and he will enter Jerusalem and ultimately make it a holy city. Now, one of the trends today, unfortunately, in seminaries across America is that there are a number of young ministerial students who are now opting for a totally different view of Bible prophecy, and there have always been many views. We believe in a pre-tribulational, premillennial rapture. The Lord's going to come back for the church, take us out of here before the tribulation. Why? Because the tribulation is the wrath of Christ, the wrath of the Lamb. You don't beat the bride up in the tribulation period and then take her to the wedding. What kind of symbolism is that? Come here, I'm going to beat the daylights out of you, and then we're going to get married. It's going to be great. Sounds like Protestant purgatory to me. Then you have the amillennialists. They come along and say, well, I don't know. I don't think any of it's ever really going to happen. You know, it's just one of these days you just die and go to heaven. Yeah, well, what about all those prophecies? You can't take those literal. Well, what about all the prophecies of the first coming of Christ? Oh, yeah, those are literal. He'd ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. Yeah, that happened. He'd be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Yeah, that happened. They'd wave palm branches. Yeah. And he'd be crucified. Yeah. And he'd rise from the dead. Yeah, that was literal. Well, if 109 prophecies of the first coming of Christ were literally fulfilled, why would not the 300 prophecies of the second coming be fulfilled? And if they're not literally fulfilled, how do you know they're ever fulfilled? No, I don't know. We don't deal with that at our church. Get another church.